You know, when I was younger, I was extremely shy, and it was painful for me to actually go up and talk to somebody that I didn't know. And even as I became a teenager, I really didn't get over it. And a lot of my friends would say to me, "Christine, I dare you to go talk to that boy, you know you like him." And I was like, oh, I can't do that. And you know, my friends were daring me, and you think about dare as taunting, goading, edging on. But you know, in reality, my friends, when they were daring me to go speak to somebody, they really were honestly telling me to get over my fears and to have the courage to get out of my comfort zone. I'm going to dare you this morning. I dare you to become an extraordinary leader. Today's event is all about leadership. That's my background and that's my passion. I spent a lot of time researching leadership. I spent a lot of time working with executive teams and CEOs and boards of directors. In 2008, I had a lot of calls because, of course, the market crashed, the world economy turned upside down, and business was not the same as it had been in the past. Companies, executives didn't know how to respond. And they said, "We have been successful for the last several years, and now we have no idea what to do." So I actually began a really interesting study. I spent time interviewing and studying 50 different companies and 50 different executives. And it was pretty easy at that point in time to segment them into 3 buckets. Those companies and executives that did not respond to the crisis situation or to the changes in the market or the changes in the business environment, and the companies didn't fare well. There were those that were kind of in the middle. They were good leaders, but they really didn't make the changes that they needed to as much as they needed to. And then there was a third category that was extraordinary. They were absolutely able to take a dire situation and turn it around, or they were able to continue to improve even though we were in a changed environment. I became fascinated with the 2 groups, the ones that were good and the ones that were extraordinary. In many ways, they had a lot of commonalities. I was able to identify some major themes of leadership that we've all heard: being honest, embracing change, thinking about excellence. But what I really wanted to know was, what was the difference between those people that were good and those people that were extraordinary? In the interviews that I had, one thing came up that became really obvious as I thought through leadership, whether you're good or whether you're extraordinary. And it all had to do with courage. I'm going to share a few examples with you of how courage makes a difference each and every day in how we show up as a leader. One of the major themes that came out from all of the interviews that I had, of course, with leaders was they said, as we think about the future, we have to be leading with excellence. That's so easy for us to say. Of course we're going to focus on quality. We're always going to be thinking about how we make something better. But those leaders that were extraordinary meant it and had the courage to implement it. Andy Taylor, who's the CEO and chairman of Enterprise Holdings, to me was the prime example of that. Enterprise, as you know, is one of the leading rental car companies in the United States and internationally. And they're, of course, known for their excellence in customer service. As I talked with Andy, I said, "Andy, how did you actually create a culture of excellence within your company? Of course, you can do the training, you can put in place, standards for customer service, but how did you actually make a difference in terms of making sure that your company was going to be #1 in customer service?" And he said, "I had to have the courage to hold everybody accountable for it. And I had to have the courage to make the hard decisions. So when a manager came up and her store was making all the numbers in terms of sales, but she was not getting the scores in terms of customer satisfaction, we would not be able to promote her. Because at the end of the day, customer satisfaction was our #1 objective. I had to have the courage to empower my people so that they actually felt like they could deliver customer service without having to ask permission each and every day. Courage made the difference in leading with excellence. Another example, all of the leaders said, of course, we're going to lead with an eye towards change. The world is different. It changes so rapidly now. We've seen study after study that says the #1 characteristic for senior executives is their ability to lead with change. The difference really came in the courage that it takes to lead with change. All of us probably implement change on a daily basis. It might be incremental. It might be small. But in many cases, we need to make transformational change, and that takes courage. Howard Schultz, who's the CEO and chairman of Starbucks, to me was the most poignant example of that. You may recall back in 2008, he was still the chairman of the company. And as he looked at where the company was headed, he knew that if they didn't make a dramatic change, they were going to not be surviving. So he came back in as CEO and he said, we have got to do some fundamental things different. He said at that point they had expanded their product line so much that they had lost the core of who they were as a business. And he said, we have got to go back to doing what we do best, and that is being the best baristas possible. He made a very bold move. He said, I'm going to shut down all of the stores on the same day, and I'm going to retrain everybody. Well, you all know at that time McDonald's was also coming in with a McCafe. And they said, this is a prime time for us to really go after our competition. They started running deals when Howard was shutting down the stores. 50-cent coffees, 50-cent McLattes. The media thought he was crazy. Schultz has gone nuts. What's he doing? He's getting rid of his product lines. He's shutting down his business to retrain everybody. He took his entire management team down to New Orleans, and it was right after Katrina. And he said, we're going to put some time into the community, and we're also going to really think about who we are as a company. And he laid out everything. He said, if you don't want to change for the company, then make the change for yourself and for the people that report to you. He had to do something bold. He had to have the courage to make the changes that were needed, and they were able to recover. A third example that I heard from all of the leaders, of course, is we all need to lead with resilience and optimism. Being in a leadership position is just not easy. The difference, however, were those people that really got right back up and kept fighting and kept persisting in the face of hardships. Sean Menke, who was the former CEO of Frontier Airlines, to me probably best exuded this. Similar to the Starbucks situation, I don't know if you all know the airline industry very well, but they run on a pretty short cash position. And the way that it worked back in 2008, when the market was crashed for Frontier Airlines, is they had a credit association that they would pay 50% of an airline ticket when somebody bought it, and then when somebody flew, they would pay them the other 50%. Well, they had a clause in their contract that said they could change it, where they would hold 100% of the payment until the person flew. Sean was just beside himself. He said, well, I'm going to call in all of my chips. I've done everything right. I've networked. I've got a lot of colleagues around the country. Guess what? In 2008, no banks were willing to reposition the credit and debt and everything else that they had, particularly for an airline. He called everybody he knew, and they would not make any changes. And he said, we're going to be bankrupt. We're going to be out of cash in 90 days. So he said, you know what? Rather than letting it happen, I'm going to force it. And he and his team over a weekend actually decided to proactively take the company into bankruptcy, because guess what? When you go into bankruptcy, you can't change any of the contracts. It was a smart move, it was a resilient move, and it was an optimistic move. It allowed him enough time to then restructure the company. The fourth area that I think really came up for me in terms of the themes that did make a difference between the good and the exceptional leaders is that they also said you have to lead with others in mind or with a higher purpose in mind. And one of my former bosses, Mike Adams, he was the president of the University of Georgia, probably exuded this the best for me in terms of what made a good leader and what made an extraordinary leader. If any of you are familiar with the South, you know football is just the end-all to be-all. You don't mess with the SEC. And there's a lot of rivalry. Well, Mike made a really tough decision, and this was many years ago. He decided he was going to end the contract for the beloved athletic director. Well, you would have thought that he had killed somebody's mother or father. Of course, Bulldog Nation went crazy. Fire Mike Adams. A petition with 35,000 names on it went to the Board of Regents in the state. Billboards went up in Atlanta. His mom and dad were in Atlanta. Fire Mike Adams. It was in the papers. The foundation for the university separated. That had never been heard of in any university before. And I had a chance to talk to Mike. I said, Mike, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, you know, you're a person. I mean, how did you deal with all of that anger? And how did you deal with people attacking you and your family and everyone else? He said, Chris, you know what? He said, I knew that the decision had to be made for the higher purpose and for the betterment of the university. He said it was in the best interest of the university to put academics ahead of athletics and to take that stand at this particular point in the life cycle of this university. And he said, it's worth it because I know that we're moving forward positively as a university. You know, as we think about being an extraordinary leader, it does take a lot of courage. And I want to say congratulations to all of the finalists for today, because I know your journeys are spectacular, and I also know that they've been difficult as well. A colleague of mine from Denver is a poet and had a quote in Forbes many years ago that I just absolutely love. It says, in life as in the dance, grace glides on blistered feet. So as you think about who you are and the type of leader you're going to be, just like my friends did to me many, many years ago, I dare you to be extraordinary. Thank you.